I've talked about interactivity before. Interactivity is the most important aspect of storytelling. When I say interactivity, you might think of video games, but in truth, all narrative fiction can and should be interactive. So what is interactivity? Let me give you a quick example. Imagine two men watching a football game. One man knows all the rules and the history of the sport. He knows the players and their individual dramas. He knows everything. The other man knows nothing. You can imagine they're having completely different experiences as they watch the game. One man is riveted, picking up all the subtext, reading between the lines, processing implications, threats, expectations. The other is confused and bored. But here's the thing, they are watching the exact same game. It's identical content, what is being shown and told on the screen. This is why when they say show don't tell, you should take that with a grain of salt. Showing, not telling doesn't guarantee interactivity. Interactivity exists above show and tell. Showing, in fact, is overrated. So is telling. This is why interactivity is so rare in modern storytelling. Nobody talks about it or even knows what it is. How can they include it in their stories? It's psychological, a back and forth between the story and the mind of the viewer. In our football example, it's the context of knowledge that forms the baseline for an interactive experience. Context creates subtext. You know you're in an interactive moment if time is able to slow down to real time or even further, and the story becomes less about the plot and more just the moment itself. A single moment can be more interesting than any epic yarn. As storytellers, it's our job to build the story up to these moments. Once you have them, you can ride them like a wave, and I'll get into that. Let's look at an example from my favorite Western, One-Eyed Jacks, starring Marlon Brando. By the way, as you start to understand interactivity more, you will realize that all the classics have great interactivity. Shakespeare, Robin Hood, King Arthur, Alibaba, Homer, on, all of them, literally all of them. These are stories that have survived through time via sometimes just word of mouth and stayed alive. Thousands of years, think about that. So many modern stories go down the memory hole, but interactivity sticks. It's the single greatest attribute to ensure your story will stand the test of time. And it's in rare supply these days, which is why I have to go back to the good old days with our boy Brando here. Now, the whole story isn't interactive. You have to build to it. You build the context to get the subtext later. Processing the subtext is when your audience starts acting in a back and forth with the story, processing threats, implications, judging relativity, re-examining the board, etc. So let's just play it through a bit. It starts with this cool first shot, by the way. Look at that. Brando and his gang are in the middle of robbing a bank. His name's Rio, by the way. They get away and are laying low in a Mexican town. They finally get to relax and enjoy the spoils of their heist. Rio is the womanizing type, and he takes it a step further and is a bit of a lying scumbag. The Mexican authorities catch up with him and blast one guy in cold blood. Boom! But Rio and his partner, a guy named Dad, get away. They flee into the mountains. The Mexican authorities give chase. They lose one horse and have to double up. Eventually, they are reduced to just one lame horse on a ridge, stuck on a ridge with the Mexican authorities closing in. They make a plan that one guy will go for two fresh horses and come back while the other guy holds off the Mexicans, and then they can get out of there. They decide that Dad will be the one to go, run off with a lame horse and come back with two fresh horses. Rio will wait for him. Keep in mind, these guys are like best friends. Rio trusts Dad with his life without a second thought. So Dad goes. He finds a nearby small Mexican ranch where he can get fresh horses. He transfers the money to a new horse, but once he gets the horse, he's looking both ways. Which way does he go? Does he go back to rescue his friend, but run the risk of them both being arrested? Or does he ride off on his own, betray his friend, but ensure his safe escape? This reminds me, we are in some interactivity here because it's obvious what he's thinking. Remember now I said show and tell is overrated. What are they telling us? Nothing. There's no dialogue at all. What are they showing us? Nothing much. We see his face, we see what he's looking at. We are aware of the context of the situation, and we pull meaning from the situation because of the context. We know that he's considering screwing his friend over. So that's an interactive moment. That's psychological. That's the good stuff. I've said before, this is almost a way you can measure interactivity in a story. How many shots of just someone's face do you have? Just their face, but we know exactly what they're thinking. This means you've set up good context. Okay, moving on. So Dad does run, and Rio gets screwed. He gets arrested. They take him past the place where Dad ran off, the ranch, and Rio sees the abandoned horse they shared. Another moment of interactivity. We know he's putting it together. His best friend screwed him. These moments of interactivity is where strong rapport between the audience and the characters on screen is built. We are thinking exactly what he's thinking. We share the inside joke that he just got screwed. What do they tell us to convey this? Nothing. What do they show us? Here, we see the lame horse and Rio's reaction. That's it. By the way, his reaction is just his face. He's not telegraphing it. He's not like overacting, because he doesn't have to. It's all there, implied by the surrounding context. He gets to sit within it. The audience loves to decode it and share that secret moment with Rio. Imagine if he shook his fist in the air. It would lose much of the rapport and interactivity. In this way, the greatest performances that we remember come from stories with strong interactivity that enable these moments. Okay, moving on. Cut to 5 years later, and Rio is escaping from prison with a buddy. That's right, he's been in prison all these years. Rio immediately begins a mission for revenge and starts asking around about Dad. Rio is catching up with a beautiful woman at a bar when he almost gets in a fight with two men competing for her attention. But one of them recognizes Rio as a famous gunslinger and de-escalates the situation by buying Rio a drink. Then he tries to recruit him for a bank job. Rio at first says screw off, but then the man tells him word on the street is he's looking for Dad, and Dad is the new sheriff of that town the bank is in. As you can imagine, this changes things for Rio. This is another strong point of interactivity. What the movie is telling us is the information relayed to Rio that Dad is the sheriff of the town they want to pull the job on. What the movie is showing us is this, Rio's face. But what is above the words and the pictures is we know Rio finally has his chance at revenge. We pull this extra meaning and emotion out of the story. We give it the power by offering our services as an audience. We cross-reference the previous information, and this allows us to know what Rio is thinking, and we share this moment with him. It's a subconscious process that happens instantaneously. You won't notice when you're doing it, but you will notice something's missing if you aren't doing it. A story that doesn't allow for this alchemical process between the story and the audience will get boring. Okay, I get it, you might think. Interactivity is empowering the audience to pull inferences out of the story based on previous context provided by the story. Yes, but hold on, I haven't gotten to the best part of what interactivity can do. To do that, I have to continue the tale of Rio. So Rio and his new gang of outlaws travel to the town where they plan to rob the bank. Now Rio and Dad are in the same town, but they haven't met yet. Rio goes to the sheriff's office. Dad isn't there. He's at his house outside town. Here we go. This is the moment the whole story has been building up to until this point. Rio approaches the house. Dad sees him coming and tells his wife and daughter-in-law to hide in the house. This is a classic Western scene. And it won't play out quite as you think. These guys used to be friends, mind you. And Dad doesn't have proof that Rio knows he screwed him. So from his perspective, the situation is still ambiguous. Rio, on the other hand, maybe he will just forget the bank plan and go for what he really wants, revenge. This is all context the audience is tracking as the two men approach. The interactivity is off the charts. The moment is so rich that time slows down. What will happen? We have to see. Then, as they meet, they begin a conversation. Previously, when I've mentioned interactivity, it comes up in strong moments that you build to. But here, the interactivity persists as a strong force that charges the entire conversation. Everything they say has a double meaning, because we know the context between them. This, ladies and gentlemen, is as good as it gets. Dad starts off with a bald-faced lie, a total excuse for why he wasn't able to save Rio. We know Rio knows he's lying, because he saw the lame horse abandoned at the ranch on the day he was arrested. Rio, in turn, lies right back. Dad then, truly believing he's out of hot water, and might even have his old friend back, invites Rio to stay for dinner and meet his family. Do you see what I mean by interactivity? Now we have Rio eating dinner with his dad and his family. Meanwhile, he is planning on robbing the bank the next day, and there is still unresolved business between Dad and Rio that is only being bandaged by temporary lies. These lies could break down at any moment. The charge persists. The charge, in fact, is so strong that it doesn't even matter what they say. What's really going on in this scene is the subtext. The audience is tracking who is lying, who knows what, when, who feels what about who. As this magnificent scene ends, and Rio says goodbye and rides off into the night, we are left with an even stronger feeling of what is to come. Rio and Dad will have to confront each other. Coming into this scene, it felt like a climax, but now the climax has been postponed and will be even greater. Interactivity up until this point has been mostly cross-referencing things that happened in the past with things in the present, but now more than ever it is extending to the future of the story as well as we anticipate what will come. The beauty of it is we don't know. We can't predict, but whatever happens, we have to keep watching. So friends, that is the power of interactivity. Interactivity gives a charge to the scenes that exist above what is told and even shown to the audience. It allows you to slow down time. Moments become rich and pregnant with implications and anticipation, and the story will ratchet down to a psychological level. Who knows what, when, who is lying? In fact, you can almost measure interactivity by these psychological shots. Shots of characters' faces with strong surrounding context. That in turn creates an intense subtext. Interactivity is the most powerful tool of storytelling. Not enough storytellers even know what it is these days. And if you use it, your story will garner word of mouth and praise and stand the test of time. If you like this video on interactivity and want to study it more, you can check out the whole book I wrote on it. Link in the description. Thanks for watching, everyone. Until next time.